Okay, let's unpack this. We've got quite a stack of material here, really digging into something fundamental, how we actually know things, how we understand the world.
That's right. It's all about getting under the hood of understanding itself.
Yeah, we're diving into, the building blocks, our ideas, and then the tools we use, our words.
And how those tools shape and sometimes limit what we can even think about or know. The texts really explore that relationship between thought and language.
So our mission today, let's try and pull out the big insights, the aha moments from this material. Maybe find some things about how our own minds work that, well, might surprise you.
Sounds good. We'll start with the basics, ideas, and words and build up from there. It's quite a journey.
It really forces you to look inward, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Okay, where do we start?
Well, the first big point right off the bat, words are signs, but they're not signs for things out there. They're signs for our ideas.
That's such a crucial distinction. It means, the meaning isn't baked into the word itself.
Right.
It's tied to whatever idea the speaker connects to that word in their head.
So if your idea of, say, freedom is different from mine, even using the same word, we're not really on the same page.
Exactly. We're talking past each other, potentially.
And what I found fascinating was where many abstract words apparently came from. Things, totally non-physical concepts.
Ah, yeah, the idea that they started as words for sensible things, things we touch or see.
Exactly, like imagine or apprehend. The material suggests they maybe started from like physical grasping or seeing.
And then got transferred metaphorically to mental actions. Even spirit may be linked to breath.
Wow. It's like we had to borrow from the physical world to even start talking about thought. Nature gave us the first metaphors.
It seems that way. And this personal connection of words to ideas, well, it's ripe for confusion. The source has that great example of the child and gold.
Oh, right. The kid only knows gold is bright, shiny yellow.
Yeah. So they see a peacock's tail, which has that color, and calls it gold. Because for them, the word just means that one idea, the color.
But an adult's idea of gold include weight, being metal, all sorts of other things.
A whole bundle of ideas. So same word, totally different concepts driving its use.
Okay, so if meaning is so personal, how do we manage to communicate?
Well, one key thing that texts point out is that most words we use aren't for unique individual things. They're general terms.
Right, it would be impossible otherwise. You can't have a name for every single blade of grass.
Exactly. Imagine the memory load. It'd be useless. So we generalize.
And the process for that is called abstraction, according to the sources?
You look at, say, Peter, James, Mary, Jane,
Okay.
and you mentally ignore what's unique to each, their height, their specific face where they live,
You strip away the differences.
and you keep only what they have in common. Maybe it's having a certain body shape, maybe it's reason. That shared bit becomes your general idea, and you label it man.
Okay, so we abstract to find the common ground. But here's the kicker, right? These general concepts, like man in the abstract, they aren't real things existing out there.
That's the big insight. The texts call them inventions and creatures of the understanding.
Made by the mind, for the mind's use. Like mental filing cabinets.
Pretty much. They exist in our heads to help us organize, not necessarily out in the world as distinct entities.
That changes how you think about categories. We're imposing the structure in a way.
We are. And this naturally leads to thinking about definitions. If words stand for these ideas we form, what does it mean to define a word?
The sources say it's basically just making someone else understand the idea you've attached to the term, usually by listing the simpler ideas that make it up.
But there's a hard limit, a really important one. Simple ideas. They can't be defined using words.
This is the classic example, trying to explain light or red to someone born blind.
Exactly. You just can't do it with words alone. You could describe the physics light waves hitting the eye, but that description isn't the experience, the sensation of light or redness.
Words can't create that raw feeling if you've never had it.
Nope. The idea itself comes only through sense experience, or reflecting on our own mind's operations.
So simple ideas like sweet or cold, their names are actually the least confusing, provided you've had the experience.
Right, because they point to one single perception. It's the complex ones where things get messy.
Okay, and the material makes a big deal about two kinds of complex ideas and their names, right?
Yes, a really key distinction. Names of mixed modes versus names of substances.
Let's start with mixed modes. What are those? Things like sacrilege, triumph.
Yeah, or adultery, gratitude, justice. The key thing is, these ideas are arbitrarily made by the mind.
Arbitrarily, meaning not based on some pattern found in nature.
Exactly. The mind just decides to bundle together certain simple ideas, maybe an action, an intention, a context, gives that bundle a connection and sticks a name on it.
So the idea of sacrilege as a concept could exist in the mind before anyone actually, did it.
Precisely. The mind makes the blueprint first, and the name is what holds that specific collection of ideas together. The texts say it's like a knot, tying them into one concept.
Okay, and this leads to a critical point. For mixed modes, their names signify their real essences.
Yes, because the real essence is simply that abstract idea the mind constructed. We know exactly what's in it because we put it there.
And the argument follows that morality is mostly made up of these kinds of ideas.
That's the claim. Justice, obligation, etc. They're complex ideas built by us. And because we can know their real essences, their definitions, morality should be capable of demonstration, like geometry.
Ah, because we define triangles and circles, we know their essences, so we can prove things about them. And we could do the same for justice if we were precise.
That's the idea. The difficulty isn't inherent unknowability, it's our sloppy, inconsistent use of the moral words. We don't agree on the definitions.
Okay, that's mixed molds, mind-made known essences. What about the other kind, names of substances, like gold or man?
These are different. We use these names thinking they refer to some real essence out there, the underlying hidden structure that makes gold, gold, or a man, a man.
But we can't actually perceive that hidden structure, can we?
Nope, not directly. So what the name actually stands for, in practice, is what the text would call the nominal essence.
Nominal essence. That's just the collection of qualities we observe.
Right, the yellow color, the heaviness, the fact that it melts, that it doesn't rust the observable simple ideas we bundle together and label gold.
And this is where the trouble really starts. Because my bundle might not be the same as yours.
Exactly. The material uses gold again. Does your idea of gold include being soluble in aqua regia? Maybe, maybe not. Does it matter?
Or man, is the essence just the shape? Or does it have to include reason? What about, edge cases the text mentioned, like monsters or infants?
Precisely. Depending on which observable qualities you pack into your nominal essence of man, you'll classify things differently.
So when we talk about species classifying things into kinds like human, horse, gold, we're not actually carving nature at its true joints based on real essences.
Not according to this view. We're grouping things based on our chosen nominal essences, based on the observable qualities we decide are important. Species becomes a function of our naming and categorizing conventions.
Wow. It's for our convenience, not a perfect map of reality. We make the species, in a sense, by how we define the names.
It's a pretty radical idea when you first encounter it. It really highlights how much our understanding is shaped by us.
And it leads straight into the problems with language, its imperfections and abuses.
Yeah, if meaning is tied to these potentially variable internal ideas and even our categories are based on our choices, well, no wonder communication is hard.
The most basic issue is just using the same word but hooking it up to different ideas in our heads. The texts say we end up arguing about the meaning of a sound.
Mm-hmm. Especially with abstract terms, right? Honor, justice, faith. People write volumes trying to fix the meaning because the underlying ideas are slippery.
And then there's the deliberate or maybe sometimes unintentional abuse of words.
Several kinds mentioned. One is just using words without having any clear idea attached at all. Parrot fashion.
Like throwing around jargon you don't really get.
Exactly. Or using terms that supposedly refer to things you can't have an idea of, like those obscure philosophical terms for hidden essences. The sources are pretty scathing about that, saying it just muddies the water.
Using fancy words to sound smart, but actually saying nothing clear.
Pretty much. Another abuse is being inconsistent, using a word one way now and another way later, shifting the goalposts of meaning.
We've probably all been guilty of that sometimes.
I think so. And maybe the worst, the texts argue, is using language deliberately to confuse or mislead, to obscure truth, not reveal it, using complexity as a smokescreen.
Whereas language should be about clear communication, connecting people.
The common tie of society, as the source puts it, not for hiding ignorance or playing games.
So really understanding these limits, how words connect, often imperfectly, to our own ideas is vital.
It changes how you listen, how you argue, everything.
Okay, so we've got ideas and words, the tools. Now let's look at the goal. Knowledge itself. What is knowledge, according to this framework?
It's actually defined quite simply. Knowledge is the perception of the agreement or disagreement of any of our ideas.
Just seeing how ideas fit together or don't.
That's the core of it. If you perceive that connection or clash, you have knowledge. If you don't perceive it, you might have belief or hope or guess, but not knowledge in this strict sense.
And there are different levels of clarity or certainty in that perception. The
Right.
texts talk about 3 degrees.
Right. First, the highest degree, intuitive knowledge. This is immediate, direct perception. No proof needed.
Like knowing white isn't black, or that 3 is more than 2.
Exactly. Or that the idea I have in my mind is that idea. You just see the agreement or disagreement instantly. It's the clearest, most certain knowledge we have. Those famous axioms like what is, they don't create this knowledge. They just describe what we intuitively grasp in specific cases.
You can't really argue with it. It's just self-evident.
It's infallible perception, yes. Then the second degree is demonstrative knowledge.
This one requires some mental legwork.
It does. Still certain, but not immediate. You need intermediate ideas, like steps in a proof, to reveal the connection between two ideas that aren't obviously linked.
Like a mathematical proof, you use steps A, B, C to show that idea X definitely connects to idea Y.
Precisely. You build a chain of intuitions, essentially. Each step is intuitively certain, and if the chain holds, the conclusion is certain too. It takes effort, requires focus.
Makes sense. Using diagrams in math probably helps keep those intermediate ideas clear.
The text suggests that's often why math seems clearer than, say, moral reasoning. The ideas are more stable and visually represented.
Okay, intuition demonstration. What's the 3rd degree?
Sensitive knowledge. This is about the existence of particular things outside ourselves affecting our senses right now.
Like knowing this microphone is here because I see and touch it, or that the sun is shining because I feel its warmth.
Yes. Now, the texts admit this isn't as certain as intuition or demonstration. You can't logically prove you're not dreaming with absolute certainty.
But it's good enough for everyday life, surely.
That's the point. It's a practical certainty. The sheer consistency and involuntariness of sense experience, the way different senses confirm each other, the difference between sensing something and just remembering it, it gives us sufficient assurance for navigating the world.
Okay, 3 degrees of knowledge. But a lot of the material focuses on the flip side. What we don't know, our ignorance.
Yes, and the reasons for it tie right back to the nature of our ideas. There are several main causes.
First up is just lacking the necessary ideas, a want of ideas.
Exactly. Our senses are limited. We can't perceive things that are too small, like the inner workings of atoms, or too remote, or things that don't affect our senses at all, like potentially spiritual beings. We just don't have the basic sensory input, the simple ideas to build knowledge from.
Our tools are too coarse, or we just don't have the right tools for some jobs.
Right. Our knowledge is bounded by the ideas we can get through sensation and reflection. If we don't have the idea, we can't know about the thing. We're ignorant of why many natural things happen because we can't see the micro-level mechanics.
Okay, what's the second reason for ignorance?
A want of discoverable connection between ideas. This is crucial. Even when we have the simple ideas that make up our concept of something, say gold,
Yeah.
we often can't perceive a necessary connection between those ideas and other properties.
Like, I know gold is yellow and heavy, I have those ideas, but just by thinking about yellow and heavy, I can't figure out why it must also melt at a certain temperature or dissolve in a specific acid.
Precisely. Because we don't know the underlying real essence, the hidden structure that causes all those properties. We can't see the necessary links between them just by thinking. We have to rely on experience, on observation.
This is why science, especially about physical things, relies so much on experiment, not just pure reason.
Exactly. Natural philosophy, as the texts call it, gives us probabilities based on experience, not the certainty of mathematical demonstration. We know that things happen, but often not the necessary why based on the essence.
The material uses that striking example. We know thought can move our bodies, and physical things can cause thoughts or sensations.
Right, like willing your arm to move or feeling pain from a burn.
But how that connection works between the non-physical mind and the physical body.
It's totally opaque. We see the input and the output, but the mechanism linking them is a mystery to our understanding. We just have to attribute it to the way things are made.
Okay, and the third cause of ignorance.
A want of tracing ideas. Sometimes the ideas might be available, and the connections might be perceivable in principle, but we just fail to find the intermediate steps, the proofs.
Like a really hard math problem that takes ages to solve, or maybe a complex moral dilemma.
Could be. It's more about the limits of our own diligence or ingenuity in finding the pathway of demonstration, rather than an inherent unknowability in the subject itself.
So, summing up ignorance. Lack of data, ideas, lack of understanding the connections between the data we have, and sometimes just not being smart or persistent enough to follow the trail.
That covers the main points. It sounds a bit bleak, maybe, but the texts also emphasize where certainty is possible.
Right, it's not all guesswork. What can we know for sure?
Well, first, our own existence. That's intuitive. Thinking, doubting, sensing, all presuppose an I that is doing it.
Can't doubt your existence without existing to do the doubting.
Got it.
Right.
Classic point, yeah. Second, the existence of God is presented as demonstrable.
How does that argument go, briefly?
It starts from the intuitive certainty that something must have existed eternally, because you can't get something from absolute nothing.
Okay.
And if we, as finite, thinking, somewhat powerful beings exist now, then the eternal source must also be knowing and powerful, arguably infinitely so. And crucially, that source can't just be unthinking matter, because matter itself doesn't produce thought.
So the argument leads to an eternal, powerful, thinking, immaterial being as the ultimate source.
That's the gist of the demonstration offered.
Okay. Own existence, God's existence. What else is certain?
Mathematics, we touched on this. Because mathematical ideas, numbers, shapes, are the mind's own clear and distinct constructions.
Their essences are known because we define them.
Exactly. So the relationships between them, their agreements and disagreements, can be perceived and demonstrated with certainty.
And this loops back to that fascinating claim about morality.
Yes, the argument that moral ideas, like justice or gratitude, are also mind-made constructs, similar to mathematical ones.
So in principle, we could achieve demonstrable certainty in ethics too.
That's the bold claim. If we could just define our moral terms, justice, property, murder, with the same precision we define triangle or addition, we could supposedly demonstrate moral truths by showing the necessary agreements or disagreements between those defined ideas.
The challenge isn't that morality is inherently fuzzy, but that our language about it is.
That's the argument. We fight about words because we haven't fixed the complex ideas they stand for.
Okay, so we have these islands of certainty. But for most of life, especially navigating the physical world and human affairs, we're not dealing with demonstration. We're in the realm of probability.
Exactly. And for this realm, the texts say, we have judgment as our faculty. It's what lets us weigh likelihoods when certainty isn't available.
How do we judge probability?
Primarily based on two things: conformity with our own experience and the testimony of others.
So if something consistently happens in our experience, fire always burns, unsupported objects always fall, we judge it highly probable.
Very highly probable. And for testimony, we assess the credibility, the number of witnesses, their integrity, their skill, whether they agree, the consistency of the story.
Makes sense, but there's a big warning here, isn't there, about just accepting what others say?
Oh yeah, a huge warning. Relying uncritically on the opinion of others just because it's common or traditional or comes from respected figures, that's pointed to as a massive source of error.
We have to use our own judgment on the evidence, not just follow the crowd.
Absolutely. The texts stress the importance of independent assessment. Sometimes the evidence is so strong, assent feels almost forced. Other times, suspension of judgment is the reasonable course. But you can't rationally assent to something that seems less probable to you than its opposite.
This leads naturally to the final big distinction the material draws between reason and faith.
Right. Reason is defined as discovering certainty or probability using our natural faculties and ideas from experience. Faith is assent based on the belief that something has been revealed by God.
And there's a very clear boundary set.
A very clear one. Nothing that contradicts the clear, self-evident dictates of reason can be accepted as faith. Reason has to be the judge of whether a purported revelation is actually from God and what it means. You can't just turn off your reason.
So reason acts as a gatekeeper for faith.
In a sense, yes. Faith finds its proper place, according to this view, in things that are above way. Reason matters we have no natural way of knowing about, like angels maybe, or specific divine plans, or in areas where reason gives us only probability. In those cases, a clear divine revelation, if accepted as such, would carry more weight than a mere probable conjecture from reason.
But the basic truths needed for life and basic religion, the texts seem optimistic that everyone can figure those out using their own reason.
Yes, the idea is that God gave everyone sufficient faculties. If people remain ignorant of essential truths, it's often put down to laziness or prejudice, a failure to use the reason they have, not an inherent inability. Reasonable religion is fine, blind tradition or fantasy isn't.
It keeps coming back to individual responsibility for thinking clearly.
It does. And the path to improving our thinking is circles right back.
Get clear ideas.
Use words consistently with settled meanings.
And carefully trace the connections. See the agreements and disagreements.
Exactly. The texts are a bit down on formal logic, like syllogisms, as the main tool for discovery.
Why is that?
The argument is syllogism is good for checking or displaying a connection once you've found it, but not great for finding it in the first place, especially with complex issues or probabilities. Real improvement comes from training your own mind to directly compare and contrast ideas.
Interesting. Okay, so wrapping this whole deep dive up, we've covered a lot of ground. From ideas as the mind's building blocks.
To words as they're often imperfect signs, leading to all sorts of potential confusion.
We've defined knowledge as perceiving how ideas connect or clash, with different levels of certainty, intuition, demonstrations, sensitive knowledge.
And we face the big areas where we don't have certainty, our ignorance due to lack of ideas or not seeing the connections, especially in the complex world of physical substances.
But we also saw areas where certainty is claimed. Our own existence, gods, mathematics, and potentially morality if we could clean up our language.
And for everything else, there's judgment and probability, guided by experience and testimony, but always needing our own reason as the final check, even on faith claims.
The real takeaway for me, I think, is how much of what we perceive as solid reality, especially categories and abstract concepts, is actually a construction project of our own minds, heavily influenced by the language we happen to use.
Yeah, understanding that interplay between ideas and words and their limitations seems absolutely crucial for any kind of clear thinking or genuine communication. It demands a certain humility.
Definitely. So maybe here's a final thought for you, the listener, to mull over. If species, if concepts like justice or gold are really just names we give to our particular bundles of observed qualities or mind-made ideas, rather than labels on some perfect, fixed reality out there, how sure can we ever be that when you and I use the same word, we're truly talking about the exact same thing? What does that inherent slipperiness mean for trying to reach agreement or even just understanding in any complicated discussion? Does it change how you'll listen next time, or maybe how you'll choose your words?
It suggests the real challenge isn't just exchanging facts, is it? It's trying to glimpse and maybe align those internal ideal landscapes we all carry around.
A lot to think about there. That was quite the exploration.